Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cluster Chronicles. Today I am really excited to be sitting down with someone who's not only a part of the cluster headache community, but someone who's spent a lot of time looking into ways in managing this disease. Craig is a fellow cluster head, and many of you may know him for his work and experience with the vitamin D3 regimen. But before we get into science, supplements, or the regimen itself, I'd really like people to get to know the person behind it. So welcome, Craig.
Oh, there's going to be an opportunity to talk about supplements. Now I'm excited, Angel. Now I'm excited. Hey, now it's good to be here. Yeah, I'm privileged to have been invited to have a chat with you. Well, let's see where it goes, I guess.
I'm
Open
also
book.
privileged.
Right, open book is what I will offer you today. I'm pretty much a dude that lives off the cuff of my shirt, my sleeves. So what you'll get is from the heart. I'll give you that much.
Good. Well, you can start with, for anyone who doesn't know you, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. When did your first experience start with cluster headaches?
It's interesting, isn't it? We were talking before you pressed record about length of time with the disease. And when I say 13 years, I think, well, it's a long time. But I was reading a comment by someone that in 1982, they had their first cluster after a bout with meningitis. Would you believe it? And I think, man, I was born in that year to have gone on for that long. It's kind of, I didn't want to say to the person that it was inspirational, but it kind of is for people that are really struggling to know that other people have been able to go on and live good lives and have families and whatnot is good. So now 13 years now with cluster headache. And I think if you ask anyone with a cluster, they'll be able to recall when it started with like vivid accuracy, and I'm no different. Like, and I can take you back there if you like.
Worse.
Actually, I think it's important that you do, because after some time with the disease and learning how to kind of live with it and manage it, you kind of forget a little bit about how disruptive it is at the very beginning. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember my mother had passed on earlier in the year, and I was getting married, and so there was a lot of stuff happening in my life, like classic of cluster headache. After all of that kind of happened, and it's in that letdown period where you kind of get to take a breath, bang. And it was November, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I elbowed Leanne awake. I said, something's wrong, something's really wrong. And there's a real urgency about it, eh? And because you don't know what's going on, you think aneurysm, stroke, like this
You're
is,
dying. Yeah.
you're dying, yeah. The ambulance isn't going to cut it. And I just remember that drive to Middlemore Hospital was about 15 minutes, and just riding up the passenger seat, just going, please, please, please.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think majority of people who have gone to the ER with cluster, the experience, and I hear it all the time now in my advocacy work, is one of, you don't get seen immediately. And if you do get seen immediately, the chances are pretty high that they won't know how to deal with you, particularly if you don't know what to say to them. So, I mean,
Especially
that
if
was
you're somebody that hasn't been diagnosed yet. Like you weren't
100,
diagnosed yet. This
100%
was
right.
new to you.
100%. And so I remember being tired and getting home, and then next night and see the GP. The GP's answer was, your mum recently passed, Craig, it's stress. And it's like, you, dude,
This is
okay.
stress. Yeah.
But just to convey how severe it was. And so, like breaking down and crying in the doctor's office. He wasn't knowledgeable, didn't refer to neurology at all. And so in those early years, like, I didn't know what I had. And it was November through March. And I just remember I didn't know alcohol was a trigger. And so I was getting smashed nocturnal attacks. And at like 4:30, you're thinking, fuck, like, I've got to go to work. And like, I can take you back to one morning where I would swig whiskey just to get like an hour or two of sleep. And then I woke up one morning, and I knew my wife had some medication. I couldn't remember if it was a codeine or morphine or whatever. And anyway, I took a couple of them, and I was driving to work. I got to work. I said to my boss, dude, I've taken the wrong medication, and can you give me some McDonald's? Like, I need to mop it up. And anyway,
You're not feeling good.
just lost during that period, really, really lost. And then when it came back like clockwork in 2014, in November, I was pretty distraught, and like I just remember thinking to myself, like, what kind of life can I offer my bride? Because she's my bride at this point, right? Like, the romance is fresh, I'm in love, and I'm thinking, like, I don't want to burden you. Like, so I'm already trying to put up a roadblock to her to go, you don't want this. This is damaged goods type thing. And come early 2015, I was like, no answers still, and I have to do something. I'm not going to mention his name, but a doctor in South Africa, I found him online. I was about to mortgage my house and fly. They were hounding me by the time I'd inquired and spoken to testimonials. It was a very polished operation. And I joined a Facebook group down here, the Australian one, and I quickly found out that it was not all it was made out to be, and that there was real risk in going for the surgery, that no one else was doing it. And so I was super deflated at that
They led
point.
you to believe they
And
took advantage of somebody that was vulnerable. They knew you were vulnerable and they knew they could
100%,
use that.
100%, right? And like, if and we'll get into the psychology and the personality piece in this talk, I'm happy to. But if there's one thing I pick up about people with this disease, is that they seem to be real staunch advocates for the underdog, and a real sense of justice and what's right. And I'm no different. And yeah, it was tough a pill to swallow, to the point where I'm out of options now, and I'd withdrawn money to buy a gun and take my life. It was that I was in that state of despair, and just like, that's why I say, like, today I'm so comfortable with the disease and I just want to help other people with it. But back then, you take yourself back there, and it's like just the uncertainty of what lies ahead now, that you've been, like, you've been confronted with this, in amongst dealing with the pain of the acute attacks, in amongst like the worry about sleep and stockpiling medication and all the stuff that goes along with this disease, right, is super difficult. And that week, well, early 2015, I'd made arrangements to see a neurologist, and that was booked, and I had to wait. I got a cot in pretty quick. I was going to pay out of pocket, and I had to, because my doctor wasn't going to fucking refer me. Would you believe it? And we'll get into that as well. But that week, I had read online about vitamin D, and I remember fucking, like, honestly, because back then I was a different guy, right? I'd come out of a decade of meth addiction. Supplements, dude, were fucking like something for yoga mums, right? They were a waste of money. They're
Hmm.
just like what you get
Yep.
in your diet. You know. And I wanted to fucking email that dude, Pete, and go, on the back of that dude in South Africa, you fucking cunts. You absolute cunts for taking advantage. You guys, how could you do that? And something in me just said,
It's
fuck.
disgusting.
I felt disgusted at Pete Batchelor when I first heard about the regimen. And
Yeah.
you know, that following week, when I went and saw the neurologist and paid the money, she diagnosed me on the spot. And she said to me as I left, I can't tell you how much to take, but I've heard vitamin D3 can be helpful for cluster headache, as well as psilocybin, but I couldn't tell you where to get it. Good luck, Craig.
Hmm.
And fuck, I left that
And this isn't,
appointment.
this is what a doctor has heard. This isn't even what they have in their,
Correct.
like when
And
they
this
go
is,
to look at their doctor forms, they don't see that there. This is what something that she's gotten from patients, right?
and the regimen, Pete had only been posting about it for 4 years now. In 2011, this is early 2015, and she's just dropped it in a comment. Obviously she couldn't prescribe it. And I immediately went back to my GP and I said, this printout, I want to do this. The vitamin D, the test, blah, blah, blah. He said, you'll kill yourself. I said, no, 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 I've spoken to, he said, no, I can't. The test isn't funded and I can't help you with that. But I can give you a prescription for vitamin D. Just take one of these per month if you're concerned about your level, it was a 50,000 IU capsule. And they'll do that in New Zealand as standard practice. And I believe Australia, because the test isn't funded. And so
Yeah,
the GP,
I asked for it in Canada, and she said it wasn't ready here yet,
they
or they
will
don't do
write
that
the
here yet.
script. And so there, I walked out of that appointment with a doctor that wasn't on board, a neurologist that had said, maybe try D3. I couldn't tell you where to get it or how much to take. And here I've got a packet of 12 times 50,000 international units, which when I read Pete's guide once, twice, and by the third time, it's starting to make sense. And I'm like, 600,000 IU, 600,000 IU. Doctor says I'm going to die. Neurologist mentions it. What have I got to lose? Craig, just take the fucking vitamin D.
When you're in that
Yeah,
much pain, you will take the chance because
100%.
it's unbearable. Yeah.
And so I started loading at 50,000 IU at that time. And on the eighth day, I woke up and I'd slept the night through. And I fucking, again, elbowed Leanne awake. I said, I've slept the night. Like, can this be real? Like, what's going on? And I hugged her. I just remember that day. It was an emotional day, but it wasn't like the game wasn't closed. It was like one night, one fluke. Like, and was still scared about tonight, the next night. And the next night they didn't come back. And so I cleared out the rest of 2015 with no more attacks. And like clockwork in 2016, I don't know what it is like, and if others are so precise in terms of episodics, but November 6th, November 7th, they're there. And 2016 was no different. And they came back that year. And so I immediately went to the doctor and I got a script for Pred, which works kind of for me. Um,
Prednisone?
yeah, it's not like for some, it'll stop the attacks. And for some, it will even break the cycle. I never had complete
Hmm.
success when I used Pret. And I started loading again. And on the eighth day, and I was like, this is really a thing. And it was a bit of a revelation. And in 2017, when my friends were drinking, I was reading papers on vitamin D going, this can't be. Like, and how can the legislation and the recommendations in New Zealand be so different to what I'm taking? And am I going to be doing myself long-term harm? And I just started asking all these questions and started reaching out to people and reached out to Pete and got to know him. And Pete, man, like, again, like, it's really emotional to say, but that relationship is one of the pivotal relationships in my life where through his graciousness of offering his time to me and his knowledge, I was just hooked on his every word. I really was. And everything he said, I would write it down and I would go and read about it and I would absorb
You
it
looked
and
up
I
to
would read
him.
it again until I got it. And I would go back and I would ask him questions. And then I started reaching out to other people that I'd read their studies and ask them questions. And I'm really starting to get a picture of, wow, like, why would I not be taking this every year? And so from then on, I was on the regimen and very much criticized to my personal life, like, you're crazy. And, time and time again, now 13 years later, I can tell you that those people, like so many people come into my mind now over the years that I told them about vitamin D. They thought I was crazy. And then years later, they got sick and they
Hmm.
called me and they said, my vitamin D, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, there was a point there that I was an evangelist trying to tell everyone about it. And I realized that everyone has their own journey and they have to make their own sense. I can't be the one that says, take vitamin D, like you're stupid if you don't. And my latter experience in recent years tells me, and I knew innately as well, that it's not the whole story. And how could it
Hmm.
be? Like, life's too intricate and too complicated for one supplement to be the answer to class or to the panacea of good health. There's so much more to it, but there's something really powerful about vitamin D for cluster. And so remission for so many years and I can talk about just bring you up to present day because I've had two times when I fell from remission and it,
Yeah.
one year, it was 2023, I had quite a severe staph infection, and I'd been through 6 rounds of antibiotics that year. And my doctor had said, we're going to have to start you on a biologic. We can't do another round of antibiotics. And when November came that year, the clusters came back as well. And I just, like, my body and my immune system that year was tattered. And again, it was like, you end up with health conditions and you kind of get backed into a corner like, what the fuck do I do? And I'm not one to give up, and I'm not one to give in either to following the traditional route, and I'm,
Hmm.
you know, by this stage in contact with vitamin D researchers around the world, and one in particular is a vitamin D researcher and really interested in the microbiome. In fact, his protocol is quite similar to the vitamin D regimen, but everything about it is focused on testing the microbiome and correcting the balance of the microbes in the gut. And I reached out to him and I said, dude, my vitamin D level, I had a recent test, it's above 100 and I've got this recurrent staph infection. And he said, it's your microbiome. You need to do something about your gut. What are you eating? Here's what I would suggest you do. And 10 days later, from following his advice, and the advice was, and again, it's a delicate conversation, but it was to cut out and go ketogenic pretty much with the approach to eating, and to throw some pretty heavy duty herbals at it, including oregano oil, which is pretty powerful,
Hmm.
and curcumin and so forth. Anyway, 10 days later, my skin cleared up remarkably. And I got in contact with Dr. Beltran. I said, how could this be? Like, again, like I didn't realize the connection between the gut and the skin was so powerful. And so he's a dermatologist, uh, trained before he diverged on the path to kind of natural medicine. And he was like, man, my friend, he's a Brazilian, so he's from South America, he talks with an
Got
accent
some
and whatnot.
spunk to him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's such a lovely man, but he's so knowledgeable about the microbiome. He said, hey, just to let you know, don't get don't count your chickens because you'll probably have what's called a Herx reaction where as your body starts to clear out the toxin, you may have a recurrence before things
Hmm.
eventually clear up for you. And true to his word, that's exactly what happened. And so that year, I think my comment in and around realizing that vitamin D isn't the whole answer really started and piqued my interest in the gut and the microbiome and what may be happening there. And then lo and behold, I mean, if you look at the 2026 literature, pick any disease now, and there is an explosion of study in and around disbalance of the bacteria and the community of bacteria and fungus and virus that inhabit the colon is highly correlated with these diseases, and specific microbes even are associated with specific diseases. And I don't know if you're aware, but in the migraine space now, there's 12 or 13 studies since 2023 really showing that dysbiosis is what it's called, where and it's interesting, because it ties into my philosophy in life is that, like, and everything about the earth, right, is about balance. It's about a system of balance, right? And equilibrium and everything, playing its part and its role. So, too, I think it is the role of the organisms in the garden. I think through a variety of things, including psychology and the way we think as well, really determines what kind of bacteria and fungus and
I
virus
was
that we
gonna
carry
touch on
around with
that. It was like psychology has a lot to do with, yeah.
Correct, and it's so hard to try and have that conversation because, it would have been so much easier in the 1970s where if you read, Kudrow, one of our heroes, Lee Kudrow, they celebrated him last year at Clusterbusters, right? And I'm like, when they said that, I'm like, most of the people in this room wouldn't have read what he said about personality.
Mhm.
Along with John Graham, they describe specifically me to a T, but they talk about like rampant transvestitism, and other things that they observed in their patients, like psychotic breaks and so forth and so on, and that we're not so comfortable to make those observations now, or at least to say that headache is psychogenic is almost offensive, and I would never ever say that. But
Hmm.
what's true for me is that I realized that through my life's journey and the way that I think and the way that I view things and the way that perhaps I ruminate on things, the way that I view and hold value to, justice and the underdog and so forth and so on. And my tiresome approach to learning and achieving and this drive that you see in other patients as well is very much somehow transcribed into our physiology, because in order to fight right, you kind of have to hold yourself in a certain way. And in order to hold yourself in a certain way, your body has to produce chemicals to produce and support that physiology. So all I'm saying
Yeah.
is through my life journey of being confused as a boy, right? Growing up in a family with my dad died before I was born. I missed him by fucking a month, right? This cruel world. It's a cruel, beautiful world, right? That's what I would say. I missed him by a
Yeah.
month. And all throughout my childhood, I always felt a little bit different, like I was missing something. And as a child, right, you can't communicate to your mum or your sisters or your teacher at school that, hey, man, like, I just got this feeling that something isn't right. And, can you help me with that? So, of course you can't, right?
Especially being so young, all you want to do is be included and be the same and be with people.
Correct.
You don't want to admit that there's something different about you. That'll just push you out. No kid is gonna say I'm
Correct.
different.
As a society, we don't wrap around
Yeah.
the fatherless or the motherless enough to let them know that they're enough, that they're okay,
Hmm.
and to just have those conversations. Because if you're more open about that as a society, then things may have been a little bit different. And it was the generation and time in which I grew up as well. I'm not saying I had a bad childhood, right? Because I had a great childhood. My mother was a rock star, mate, like 30-year Presbyterian preschool teacher. Like that's where I get my values from and whatnot. But just that feeling of difference as a child, that in my teens, man, that first joint was just a relief for me. I remember with my mate Sean we'd stolen a joint and we went down to the park, and I just remember, man, all of the noise,
Hmm.
just melted away for a moment, and boy,
Disappears.
that felt good. And that translated into my teens where I did a lot of drugs to escape, and then that kind of translated into adulthood or early adulthood where the
Hmm.
drugs stayed with me, and I was a very smart addict in that I never hit rock bottom. And I wish I had of, I wish I wasn't so industrious that I always had money in my account to be able to afford it. And right throughout my 20s, I was a chef, I was working 50, 60 hours. And when I wasn't working 50 or 60 hours, I was on it, right? And there was not a second to sit with my grief, my hole, my emptiness, my
Reflect.
insecurities, to be able to reconcile them. And so as that continued in my life, I got cluster headache. And I said to my sister with this last cycle, you know, in some ways, I wish I'd rebelled so fucking much as a child that I was a delinquent criminal, completely violent, probably today in jail, but I probably wouldn't have cluster because I would have been able to express all of the rage
Ex
and all of the
hmm
guilt and all of the
You can hold it
shame.
in. Yeah.
Correct, right? And so you try and tell me that that doesn't have something to do with cluster headache.
I
Well, certainly
resonate with
that's,
exactly what you said when you
you
said
know,
that all these things happened and then you just got a sense of relief. The exact same thing happened to me, everything. And then all of a sudden I was like, finally, and cluster headache.
it's in,
My
it,
experience is
you
very
know,
similar to yours.
at 32 years of age, I think it was, I pretty much textbook case, a textbook case. And so there's something in it there. And that's why I did that personality kind of quiz recently. And the same trend came through from the original study, And like with any social media post, there were people that were quick to critique that. And I acknowledged, mate, I'm not a scientist. When people were studying science, I was smoking a meth pipe, for heaven's sake, right? It's only through my interest as a patient later that I
Hmm.
reserve the right to explore these things. And I want to. I want to ask those questions because it feels to me like our researchers maybe don't want to, or our society's become so PC that if a researcher said that to me, they might be offending me. But somehow connect
Hmm.
the dots between that psychology piece and the physiology piece because again, right, nothing exists in isolation, just as vitamin
It's
D
all
isn't the
connected.
answer, right? It's just a piece, it's just a tool in a number of tools that we can have in our toolkit. And then, so most recently, and I'll talk about,
Hmm.
so the 2023 fallout was one of my immune system and an infection. And that year I got out of it through another loading dose in herbals and changing my diet, became interested in the microbiome. We'll talk more about that because I don't believe ketogenic is a long-term solution. And there's a reason.
So you didn't continue dosing vitamin D throughout the whole year.
I do.
You
No,
only
I
did
do.
it when you
I
were.
still,
Now
I
you do, but
still
this is the beginning.
But correct, yeah, yeah. And so earlier this year, it was more social pressure in and around a change in work circumstance and pressure in relationships. And it was again just in the letdown period that the cluster came back like last year's, straight down to the lab, got the test back, level was 80, so very much kind of in the range and target for the regimen, but still. And so I did another loading dose immediately, 100,000 international units per day. I know my body, I know my calcium homeostasis. I know that if I needed to take 1 million units at 80, I would be completely fine. I loaded 600,000 and it didn't kick the cluster. And I will say that the attacks weren't as severe. Like, I don't think I experienced anything more than a 6, but it was still a stark reminder of how fucking painful the things are.
Terrifying.
A-
Hmm.
And, and
And every attack, you don't know if it's going to get past the 6. You have no idea until it's over,
correct.
right?
There were so many things about the cycle that I think, I think in some ways I was supposed to have it. But in this cycle, um, again, like I probably I've grown a lot of mushrooms in my time. During COVID, I grew tons of them. I didn't take that much. I just enjoyed the hobby. Mycology is so fucking interesting when you
It
nail the
is. Yeah.
process.
I know a few people that are really good at it.
So and I reached out and I got some and I dosed and it was that's so difficult and I couldn't imagine how hard it is for someone from a more straight edge background to make the decision to take a psychedelic. It must be a really hard,
Hmm.
brave thing for people to do. I was comfortable, but I was apprehensive, is what I would say. And that first dose felt wonderful. I cried my fucking ass off. I released so much stuff. I apologized to my wife. I apologized to my sister for some things I'd said recently and just realized, like, Craig, lay it down, brother. Like, lay it down because you're only
You can't
hurting
hold it in
yourself.
anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that I've learned all this now. So it's like I can recognize when I'm starting to ruminate too much and I can pull myself back and go, sister, you're my sister. Like, I love you. And I'm sorry for the things that I said. Like we could both die tomorrow. Like, so why would I want to
We don't need to
maintain,
fight yet.
you know, but after that evening on the come down, the attack was severe. And right throughout that night, I was left wondering, have I done the right thing? Busting. Man, I was like, I'm in two minds about that. And here's where I'll tear up again because I think of Dan Irvin having said, don't get your cobber down. I think of the words that he used. Don't you get your copper down, Craig, if it doesn't work the first time. Some of us need 2 or 3 doses to get to your destination. Keep
Hmm.
going. It's like, if I hadn't had that old hand say that, I don't know if I would have had the confidence to do the second dose. So thank you, Dan, brother. your accents. I can't wait to see you. I hope you're there in October, bro. Like, and so I took the second dose, and again, I had a great experience. Like, I let a lot out. I had another really strong attack on the come down, but the next day I
Hmm.
was clear, and I haven't had an attack since. So how important is
That's
it
happened
to
to me
just,
when I dose too. Every time I come down, the attack coming down is just, it makes
it's
you
hard,
question
eh?
and beat yourself up like you did something wrong, but it's not
And
usually it.
one thing about, I will talk about that last cycle and what I'm now doing in New Zealand is
Hmm.
is oxygen. I mean, it works remarkably well for me, the cluster
Me
O2
too.
kit. And fuck,
Yep.
I will say one thing, right? I saw this rescue cat that's now my best mate, Gil Fisher, I call him. He was playing around with my cluster O2 kit one night, and I freaked out. I'm like, what the
I
fuck
would
do
have
I
too.
do? What am I going to do if that's
Why are you touching it?
fucked, right? And so I made myself the redneck reservoir bag, paid bachelors. And this is the thing, it's buried in the Cluster Busters forum, but it's a plastic bag with a Coke bottle and a tube. And it's
I
cool.
see. I can see the ingenuity. Yeah.
If you're waiting for the Cluster O2 kit, if you're broken ass and you really need to
You're at,
abort,
you're at the
but
hospital and they
maybe
want to give you one of those shitty masks.
redneck reservoir bag. People think Pete Batch D3, but he also did a ton of work with oxygen. So I made one of those, and just really good. Like, if you are in a situation where you've ordered it from the States and it's a week away and you've got your oxygen, you've got your regulator, redneck reservoir bag, well, why not? Right. Try it, look it
Hmm.
up, and it's worth a shot. But the because I was paying for it, because they declined to supply the oxygen. And I got a written record of that. And it was $100 a tank for a D2 size
Hmm.
tank. It'd do like 2.5, 3 days. And I'm just thinking the whole time, this thing that we do with meds, should I use it? Should I not use it? Should I hold it? I should stockpile it. Fuck.
You
The
almost
attack.
sometimes make your attacks worse and last longer because you're trying to save your oxygen. I did the same
Correct.
thing, unfortunately. It's
It's
not covered in Canada either.
It's like, so it's Friday night. I've got 3/4 of a tank. Fuck. So that gives me X number of aborts. So now I have to, like, it's not, and I'm just like,
It's
it just
terrifying.
adds to the burden of what you go through, right? The attack, then the worry about the supply of meds. And it is. It's like, it is drug seeking behavior, but what else would you do? Like,
Hmm.
you have to. Like, you've got no choice. And so oxygen, it was great, and it got me out of cycle. And you know what? Is that oxygen, I've since discovered through making an official Information Act request of Health New Zealand, is documented as being covered in New Zealand. 100% covered for paroxysmal conditions, albeit, and I suspect this may be true for many countries around the world, is that the guideline
Hmm.
doesn't one mention cluster headache. And in the appendix, where it refers some guidelines about cluster headache, it opens up to a 404 link invalid. So any GP around the country, north to south, would never be able to understand the pathway clearly to be able to advocate for their patient, to be able to get them oxygen, and for the
Hmm.
respiratory specialists in the region to have no kind of clear guidelines to be able to put processes in place in their region to look after cluster headache patients is a real gap. And so that's the gap I'm trying to close. And so who writes the legislation? The neurologist that's working to the bone, that, like, who does that? Because any spare time they have, I'd imagine they would want to gift it to their family.
Hmm.
And then when you start looking at legislation, when should someone get oxygen? Like, if you're a first time presentation to your doctor and you fulfill the diagnostic criteria for cluster headache, should you need to get a neurologist referral, which may take weeks to months before you can access oxygen? Or should the physician, the GP, be able to go, okay, fulfills the criteria. The pathway says X, and oxygen's the cleanest and probably the cheapest abortive I could offer. Engage the respiratory specialist and organise oxygen in the community. And that should be a 1 or 2 day process.
I think it's a I think it's personal choice for the doctor. I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't know, but I think it's a personal choice because I've heard of people saying, "Hey, GP, this is what works for our cluster headaches. I don't know what else we should do while we're waiting for my neurologist," and they prescribe it. And then I've heard the opposite, where their GP tells them it's going to kill them using that much oxygen on that high of a rate, or
Because they've got nothing documented to be
they have
able
no
to
idea.
refer.
Yeah.
Right. They do have some diagnostic criteria that they work through in New Zealand, and they can escalate to a neurologist if the case, like maybe it's a first time presentation over 50, or, a side switch in the attacks, or
Hmm.
medication's no longer working. But there's a lot of work to do there. So I've done some drafting of the legislation there and started a trust here in New Zealand, and got the neurologist who was the one who diagnosed me, who originally mentioned vitamin D3 those many years ago, is now offering her time for the trust to review the documentation.
The same.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's really, really awesome to have last week been able to email her and say, hey, I just interviewed the professor that identified both 25 and 125 dihydroxy vitamin D in the lab in the 1970s, and his level is the same. So this is the guy, right? As a postgraduate student, Professor Hollick, just to give context on the regimen. So Pete Batchelor's regimen that we follow, the target to elevate your vitamin D level to is 80 to 100 nanograms per milliliter. Quest Laboratories in the States, if you get your lab results, the kind of the peak is 100 nanograms per milliliter. So the regimen's not targeting anything that's excessive. And Professor Hollick, who was the one that identified both the storage form that we measure when we go and get a test, as well as the hormonal form in the lab in the 1970s, I spoke to him a week and a half ago. I said, what do you reckon about the regimen? And he said, well, I'm 80, my vitamin D level's 80. I seem to be doing okay. I'm like, well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You've got no one's published more research on vitamin D than that very sincere gentleman. So don't
Hmm.
take my word for it. And it's a really interesting thing because classically, vitamin D, right, is the sunlight vitamin, and it enables us to kind of mineralize calcium, and that's its job, really. And most doctors just think that that's what it does. But what Professor Hollick
And that's
was
it.
able to show, yeah, there's more to it. It also has, and it's really interesting, right, that human beings, in terms of genes, really aren't that complex. A housefly actually has more genes than us, I believe. We have about 20,000 genes, there or thereabouts, and 2,000 of those have a responding portion that vitamin D interacts with and turns up or turns down the transcription of that gene. And many of those genes are related to inflammation and inflammatory pathways in so many different ways. Vitamin D is quite profound in terms of its impact on the microbiome, in terms of changing the ratio of bacteria to a balance that is less inflammatory. One of the problems, right, with having a disturbed microbiome, it's so delicate and it's so beautiful, biology. I could give you an example of this for the listeners, right? Just to get a glimpse. There are thousands of different types of bacteria, and really all the GI tract is a tube from our mouth to our anus, right? And we absorb stuff that we've eaten and we expel the waste. But specific bacteria carry out specific roles in the body and in the gut. Akkermansia is one that's talked about quite common on podcasts now. And Akkermansia, right, is if you kind of picture that's your canal, and lining the canal is like mucus, and that mucus is continually produced, and it kind of provides a lubrication so everything can pass through the tube. But what happens is that mucus captures and immobilizes virus and bacteria that are trying to interact with the lining, and you don't want that. And what happens is that Akkermansia comes along and he eats our mucus, and he eats it all up. And in doing that job, it actually promotes our cells to make fresh mucus. And so just think about it, right? If Akkermansia's balance in the body is too much, well, then he can eat too much mucus and degrade that kind of protective barrier. And if there's not enough, well, then all of that mucus can kind of harbor all of that bacteria, so forth and so on, is to the point that if you have
Everything's about
degradation
balance.
of that balance, the end result that I think, if I understand what the literature shows, is that once that mucus layer degrades, there's an interaction of the contents of the colon with the cells that line the colon, and the cells that line the colon become more permeable. And so you have things like, and they're called endotoxins and exotoxins,
Mhm.
like from bacteria, there's these things called lipopolysaccharide. And lipopolysaccharide is
Right.
it's a it's a potent stabilizer.
So,
Sorry,
pardon, what did you call it?
sorry,
What did you call it?
what?
Polysacchariide? What is the,
Lipopolysaccharide, or
oh, okay.
LPS. It's the exoskeleton of a gram-negative bacteria, and a little bit of lipopolysaccharide entering the system is not a bad thing, right? And that's why most of our immune system is actually in our gut, so that that interaction of the lipopolysaccharide and the bacterial endotoxins that actually do make it through interact with the immune system, and it actually trains them, right? So they're actually ready for action, and those immune cells can then migrate off to different parts of the body and carry out functions. But it's when the level of leaky gut or permeability increases that the interaction of those molecules with the immune system is such that it creates systemic inflammation, and that inflammation is what, again, if I understand at least the migraine studies, is
Yeah.
what leads to or contributes at least to its pathogenesis. So is one of the solutions to target the microbiome, reduce the intestinal permeability, reduce the amount of systemic inflammation, and then observe if that has an improvement on one's headache condition or other health condition? I suspect it might be the case. It's just really difficult for you or I to have our stool tested. And the stool tests are
Mhm.
still pretty new, and I'm not sure that they're entirely accurate, but it's certainly really interesting. I tell you another thing.
The first thing I was told when I got cluster headaches was like, watch inflammation. Everything
And
coincides.
you
Yeah.
see like everyone talking about different strategies to kind of to manage inflammation. And I just wonder if they're all blind without analyzing one stool to be able to understand what bacteria are there to begin with, and then be quite targeted in your selection
Mhm.
of nutrition, herbals, supplements, and other medications as well, that may be able to reverse or restore the balance to that ecosystem. But again, I may be speaking out of turn, because there's nothing that's really
I don't think
there's
so.
been no study in cluster looking at these things yet.
Exactly. So I don't think you're speaking out of turn. You're speaking from your personal experience. And I think clusters are unique to each person, so your personal experience is not valid. And
The
I agree
I,
personally with it.
I was going to say, one of the other things that is coming out in and around psychedelics, again, that's a super interesting topic. I mean, just to look at the trend of DNT in the cluster headache community, and the explosion of reports, remarkable reports about psilocybin and
Hmm.
psilocybin's interaction with the microbiome as well. There was a paper published last year that suggested that its efficacy may in part be related to the baseline state of one's microbiome and how one's microbiome interacts with the mushroom. And more than that, the mushroom has some kind of influence, just as I said, vitamin D does, on the balance of the community of bacteria that live in the stomach. I think we're going to see more on this in the coming years. I'm pretty excited about it. Like, I'm always
I
watching
don't
my
think it's too
environment.
far-fetched at all. If you have black mold in your house, it affects your mental state. It's
Yeah.
kind of the same thing. Your gut and the house is your brain, and I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I'll cut that
No,
part
no,
out.
no,
But
I
it kind of
agree.
reminds.
But how could it just be mold in your house? How could it just be, I guess I'm playing the devil's advocate to an extent when I say that could be the mold in your house, but it's also no coincidence that patients. So,
Mhm.
I just, yeah, it's just interesting. Just interesting. And, there's so many interesting things to talk about with clusters. You could go on for days and days. Like, a lot of pregnant women throughout my years, there's comments where women say miraculously during pregnancy, the cluster left them well alone, and it was only after they gave birth that the clusters came back. And I've always seen those comments, and I've always thought, man, I wonder if you guys realize how miraculous it is that vitamin D metabolism changes so dramatically during the time that a woman's pregnant, that the level of calcium in your blood rises so much that if I had the same, I would
Mhm.
die. Yet somehow they don't fully understand it. But I suspect that vitamin D has something to do with that.
That's possible. Yeah, I've heard of most of the women I've heard of. They like it's not every woman because I definitely talked to women that
Yeah,
still
not
get
all. Yeah.
attacks while they're pregnant. But a
Yeah.
lot of women, their attacks stop, and then 4 weeks after they come, like it's like clockwork.
Multiple sclerosis is known to do the same
Mhm.
thing right after baby's born.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And it makes sense, right? Because, there's sacrifice on your body to support something new and something great. And, so
Mhm.
what do I know? What do I know?
I have a
Yeah, so
question
hey,
for you.
yeah.
We were talking about the vitamin D3 regimen. Do you worry that people might hear about the vitamin D3 regimen and think it's a guaranteed cure? Because you know how desperate and vulnerable people get when they're in that mind state, right? Do you think that somebody might think that this is the answer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I
maybe what
mean, I
would you
listen.
say to somebody that hasn't gotten the same results?
I would say that, I mean, if you wanted to talk about non-response, I recently ran some analysis over as many comments as I possibly could, and in terms of what people had said about their experience. In my experience, kind of speaking and communicating with people that do the regimen, I would suggest in most cases people just don't take the time to do it properly. Like, they don't do the loading dose, or they don't test their levels to be able to understand what their baseline is and to be able to do it safely as well. And so I think a
Mhm.
lot of the success of applying the regimen comes down to doing it properly. And then I know that it doesn't work for everyone. The poll of 313 people shows that roughly 52 or 53% of people get completely pain free from those 313. And roughly 80% say that they see a dramatic increase, benefit in
Decrease.
terms of a
Yeah.
decrease in frequency and intensity. So, what I would say to people is that it's worth a shot in the context of the overall safety of taking vitamin D. I'm not saying do it nonchalantly. I'm never going to say that, right? Test your level. Everyone responds a little bit differently, right? That's why the guide suggests take the baseline labs, take the follow up labs. But you'll see that interview with Professor Hollick, you've got the world's top professor saying he keeps his level pretty much the same. I would say that it's worth a shot if you haven't tried it because you have a preconception about it, like not for me, just like I was, right? I was the
Yeah.
fucking worst at it, right? So I get it. I get that you would listen to me and go, like, dude, come on, man. Like, fuck off. And that's fine. It's all good. But so I'm not saying it's a cure. I'm saying it's worth a shot. And
It's
and
worth a shot.
and
Yeah.
I would say it's worth a shot stacking as many of those treatments, those patient-led treatments as you can. Man, there's something special about taking a 1 to 1.5 gram psilocybin dose as a human being. There really is. You store tension, right? You really do in life. Of course you do. Nothing goes smoothly. God didn't send us here
Hmm.
for a smooth ride, sister. Like, come on, get real about
It
it.
would be boring.
Yeah. Like, if we all liked the same shit, thought the same things,
Yeah,
that's why I'm okay
life
with
wouldn't
you.
be life.
Craig, you're fucking nuts. It's all good. Like we're in a duality here, right? You can't appreciate hot without experiencing cold. You can't have a
Hmm.
saint without having a fucking sinner, right? And they all belong on God's earth, right? So I'm all good with that. But I would say stack the treatments, psilocybin. There was something about those recent experiences that was just really what my soul needed. And I feel like I would like to do that 3 or 4 times per year so I can take stock, so I can give thanks, so I can put things into a perspective that makes me go, fuck, don't hold on to that and give thanks for that. Like just
Hmm.
realign, just realign for a moment, because it's so easy to just get wound up in our little creature
Get
issues
stuck
without
in your head, yeah.
man.
Especially with society, it's not made to be, we're not like us as human beings. I don't think we're made to be doing what we do on a daily basis in society, but we have to. So we have to figure out ways to give ourselves grace in between. Yeah.
Man, it's been the big learning of my life is to give myself grace. Yeah, I haven't mastered it yet, right? And there's heaps to that, like I think I mentioned to you about those TRE exercises. Man, I've got to do one of those. I'm well overdue for them. What a real hoot and what a relaxing thing to do. I think it's all about throwing things into your life like that just, yeah, balance. I keep on coming back to it, eh? It's just balance. And, like in my life, through my transgressions, my drug abuse, and I don't blame myself for that at all. Like I understand it now, but I tell you, my biggest fear, right? And I'm still trying to work this out in my mind and actually understand what that fear relates to. But the best way I can describe it to you, Angel, is that when I die, when I am at the pearly gates, I don't want to have a feeling of wanting to look away, of shame. I want to be able to look him in the eye and go, dude, you saw that I fucked up in my early days, but man, I came full circle and I learned those lessons that you placed me here for. And
Hmm.
either came awfully close to cracking the case open and solving whatever it was for me to solve, or actually cracking the case. If I have to come back again
You did what you
for
could to try.
unfinished
Yeah.
business, that's all good. That's all good. But I just want to be proud in my efforts that I tried, that I didn't
Hmm.
squander it away, that this beautiful place that we've been placed in through grief and through misery and through circumstance and all the shit part of life, right? Of losing my dad before I even got to meet him and all the hideous shit in life is you have to take it and you have to accept it and you have to be thankful
Hmm.
for it because for without, how could I be who I am today and be on the phone with someone last Friday night that was about to hurt themselves? Like it all happened for a reason. And grace, I really like that you said that. I really like that you said that because it is. It's just about giving yourself space and grace. Yeah. So many people struggle with that, Angel, I tell you, in our community and beyond. And it's all you can
A lot of
really
people in our
hope.
community blame themselves, and it hurts me that they blame themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I told you that you would get it from the heart, right?
Hmm. I want something more from the heart. If you could go back to the worst point of your cluster journey and sit beside yourself for a few minutes, what would you tell that version of Craig?
That was right.
If you could go back and sit with yourself in one of your worst parts of your cluster journey, what would you tell that version of Craig? You and maybe
It's
what
so
would you want every cluster head watching this to hear? Take your time.
it's I wouldn't change it for the world, Angel. Like it sounds crazy to say that, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I just
I
I
would.
just encourage people if they're lost today, find your community and let them guide you home and let them help you and support you because you don't have to do it alone. And that's why I wouldn't change it. If I
You're
didn't
not
have
crazy for thinking you wouldn't change it.
I
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
have
change it
my
either.
best
It's
mate.
made me who I am.
Like, I've met the people that are my best mates are in this family, right? I would do anything for my cluster headache friends, like, and they would for me too. And that's the remarkable thing about this community is that they are the best people. I'm telling you, they're the best people that you will meet. If you look into their heart, you will find just golden people. That's what this is what the leonine mouse thing that Graham talked about, right? With the rugged exterior and the orange peely skin that he described, but he
Hmm.
talks about a soft mouse inside, and it's true. You spend time in the
I've never
community
had
and you talk
anybody,
to people.
yeah,
It's true.
I've never had anybody show up for me like my cluster headache family in my whole life, and not in so many different ways I couldn't even explain.
Hey,
I agree with you.
people have got no time to listen to me waffle on emotionally, but I'm glad that I got those things out. It's because it's okay to be vulnerable. I think it's necessary,
It
man,
is. It's so
because,
strange.
like, maybe that's, I wouldn't go back to the cluster headache Craig 13 years ago. I would go back earlier than that and just say it's okay to be vulnerable, mate. Like sit in that grief, because if you don't, you only delay, right? And that
The
delay will
inevitable.
cost you physiologically as well. Yeah, 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 yeah. And
I think that's starting to be
like,
more recognized these days is having to hold in all those emotions and all the things you've gone through in life just turns into, it manifests into sickness, whether it's multiple sclerosis or a cancer or cluster headaches or migraines. It manifests into something else. Gut issues is a big one too.
yeah,
It's very important. And I like that you said you would go back to you earlier to tell yourself, because I think I would probably do the same because I don't think I would change anything, but I would tell myself to give myself more grace for sure.
yeah, for sure. I see you in October.
I'll see you in October, Craig.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much for coming and talking
It's
with
only
us.
6 weeks away. If anyone's watching, I say that, and like, come and see us, man. Like, I'm flying
We'll come
13
out there.
hours. Like, get yourself there. If you're on the fence, like, what can I do to get you on the other side of the fence? Basically, shoot me a DM. Let me change your mind and just get you there. Because it really is a cool experience. It really is. Oh man, I'm looking forward to
Hmm.
seeing you. My girl, giving
Yeah.
you a big hug.
Get a hold of
Yeah.
Craig, join the Discord server. We'll answer any questions you need to know. Yeah.
Take care,
It's an
man.
honor to have
Thank
you,
you.
Craig. You too.
Okay. See
Talk
ya.
to you later.